just want to say on behalf of my family, we appreciate so much your prayers. We appreciate the plant that was into our house. As Marty said, Butch's got a long road to hoe, and he's pretty tough. Maybe sometimes too tough, but he appreciates all the prayers and the thoughts that are being sent his way. Especially keep Linda, his wife, in your prayers as well. So, with God's help, and only with God's help, will he get through this. A couple of weeks ago, we discussed, we're going to be in Hebrews this morning. We discussed in Hebrews chapter 2 the idea of drifting away. And it's an interesting thought when you think about the word drifting. And so this morning I want to specifically in Hebrews, we're going to be looking at Hebrews chapter 6. And as we look at Hebrews chapter 6 and we think about the idea of drifting, we're also going to be thinking about the idea of an anchor. Now, one of the great luxuries in life is that of an air mattress. Now, let me repeat that. One of the great luxuries in life is that of an air mattress. Now, I want everybody this morning to close your eyes. Some of you are not listening, Bill. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to visualize. Visualization is a great thing. I want you to visualize your preacher laying on an air mattress at Lake Tenkiller and taking a great nap. Margaret, quit shaking your head like that. But that's what you're visualizing. And you're visualizing that preacher laying on his air mattress one afternoon and taking a great nap and drifting and drifting and drifting away. Now you can open your eyes now. I don't want some of you to continue to sleep. But it dawned on me that day, I wasn't anchored to anything. And when I woke up, I looked around and I was a long way from where I started. So in my great mind, I thought there's got to be a way that I can enjoy my air mattress and I can lay on that air mattress and not worry about drifting. So I invented the first ever air mattress anchor. It's what I had at camp. And here's what I will tell you. And Bill and Sue can vouch for this. It works. So the next day when I go down to the area, I take my air mattress. I had poked a little hole in the top of my air mattress because it's not one you blow up. It's one of those that you unfold. And I put the end of this rope and I put it through there and I tied it to my air mattress and I threw that weight down to the bottom and I was anchored. Actually, I was anchored so much that when I got done that day, Brenda, a lady asked me, she said, "We're curious." And I said, "What?" She said, "How did you stay in the same spot for as long as you did?" And I said, "Because I was anchored." Anchored to what? To my infamous, world famous, first ever, my $1 million discovery of an air mattress anchor.
Is that enough weight to hold you?
Now here's what I'm going to say about that. Only at Lakeview can a person from the audience question the preacher's weight and get away with it. You didn't do that with Ed last week. And I appreciate Ed. Matter of fact, I appreciate him so much that Joseph tried to come up here last week, I understand, and help him. Now, if Joseph comes up here today, Joseph's going to stay up here and help me. But here's my point. Without this, I just drifted all over Lakeview. So my question today is, what are we anchored to? Because we're all anchored to something. And we know that life throws us things that we're not ready for, and if we're not anchored correctly, we may drift. We may go here, there, and yonder, but with an anchor, we're going to stay pretty close to what we know and where we're safe. Hebrews chapter 6, we're going to look at the first verses. I'm going to comment on some of those, but basically what we're going to look at is the last 3 verses. So let us stop going over the basic teachings about Christ again and again. Now you have to understand what he said was in chapter 5, at the end of chapter 5, solid food is for those who are mature and who through training have the skill to recognize the difference between right and wrong. That's the end of chapter 5. And in the start of chapter 6, he says, so because of that, let us stop going over the basic teachings. Now I look around in here and 99% of us can fall into that category. We don't need to keep going over the basic teachings. We understand those. And he actually goes on to tell us what we don't need to keep discussing, which is we don't need to start again with the fundamental importance of repenting of evil deeds, placing our faith in God. You don't need further instruction about baptism, the laying on of hands, the resurrection of the dead, the eternal judgment. And so, God willing, we will move forward to a further understanding. We don't need to just keep hashing over those things, he says. Verse 9, at the end of verse 9, there's a statement. We are confident that you are meant for better things. What are those things? Things that come with salvation. Now that's important. That's a verse that's important for us to understand as we get to the end of this chapter and we talk about our anchor. We have to understand that with salvation, there are things that come with it. Verse 11. He says, the writer, whoever that writer is, our great desire is that you will keep on loving others as long as life lasts, in order to make certain that what you hope for will come true. That's an important statement as we get to the end. Then you will not become spiritually dull and indifferent. Instead, you will follow the example of those who are going to inherit God's promises because of their faith and endurance. Now, I want to stop right here and say this. He's talking to us. Or he should be talking to us. Because we are going to continue to love to the end. That's a statement that's not, I don't think, debatable. We are going to do that. As my cousin said one time in a sermon, we're going to love whether it kills us or not. Or something like that. And I laughed that day, But anyway. But we're going to continue to love. And because of that, we're not going to become dull of hearing. Spiritually dull and indifferent. That's not going to happen to us. Hopefully that's not going to happen. Instead, he says you will follow the example of those, and that's us. People should be following the example that we are setting in front of them because of our love for other people. Because of the thought process of not becoming spiritually indifferent. That's the example that we need to be setting for other people. Now skip down to verse 16. Because this chapter, right in the middle of Hebrews, I think, is a great chapter in the Bible that gives me, Tim Smith, the Christian person that I've been since I've been 12, it gives me exactly what I need today. It should give you exactly what you need today. And that hope that we have, I guess it just went off. Anyway, never mind. Verse 16. Now when people take an oath, they call on someone greater than themselves to hold them to it. And without any question, that oath is binding. That's an oath. It says when we take that oath that we're going to have someone keep us responsible. God also bound himself with an oath, so that those who received the promise could be perfectly sure that he would never change his mind. Now, have you ever stopped to think that God took an oath? And because of that oath, what did it say? That people take oaths, why? To be held responsible for that oath that they just took. God took an oath. What was the oath that he took? So that those who received the promise could be perfectly sure that he would never change his mind. So God has given both his promise and his oath. These two things are unchangeable because it is impossible for God to lie. God can't lie. And God's given us a promise, but most importantly, he's given us his oath. And because of that, the writer says, therefore, we who have fled to him, I love that. We fled to him. What did we do? We didn't run from God. We ran to God to get refuge. We ran to God in order to receive, in order to understand, in order to get that oath that God has promised. We fled to him for refuge, can have great confidence as we hold to the hope that lies before us. All right. I want you to think a minute what the writer just said. What he just said about we hold, I'm holding to what? What does the writer just say? I hold to what? The hope that lies before us. This hope is a strong and trustworthy, say it out loud together, louder, anchor. What does an anchor do? Keeps you right there. Now here's what we'll get into later. But that anchor is attached The anchor has got to be attached. An anchor that's not attached doesn't do a whole lot of good. This hope is a strong, trustworthy anchor for our souls. It leads us through the curtain into God's inner sanctuary. Jesus has already gone in there for us. That anchor, the writer says, gets us into the sanctuary where God and Jesus Christ are. Hope anchors the soul. We have an anchor. What does it mean to be told that God has secured for us with promise and oath that we are to lay hold of it? What does that mean, lay hold of it? What does lay hold of it mean in real life experience? It means to bank on that hope. Trust in it. Feel secure in it. Be satisfied with it. Long for it. So how can we move our heart toward that idea of laying hold of your hope? Now, let's stop right there, and we have to keep this in the forefront of our mind as we talk about the next little bit. What does the anchor represent? Hope. Hope anchors our soul. So this anchor is our hope, and we're going to talk about that. But here are some ways that we can lay hold of that hope. Number one, we can meditate from the Bible on how sure our hope is in the presence of God. Meditate from the Bible. Study our Bible. Read our Bible. Understand what that Bible says. That's going to make sure that we understand how sure that hope is. Pray earnestly that God will open our mind and heart to this greatness and this certainty and incline you to hope in Him. Pray that God opens our mind, that we understand how great this hope is, how secure this hope is. We need to understand how much Christ suffered for our hope. We need to understand that we can be confident in heaven in that hope. When the 28-year-old missionary John Stam, a missionary to China, was being led away to his and his wife's execution for being a missionary in China by the communist people that were there, someone on the road asked him, "Where are you going?" And his reply is, "To heaven." That's that anchor. He had that anchor. He knew where he was going. And then last, to get that idea of laying hold of your hope, we can help each other. We can help each other do these things by exhorting each other every day to lay hold of that hope. So let's talk about the anchor. First, let's talk about the word hope. That word hope can be used in a lot of ways. Definition: a subjective feeling or conviction in the soul, which would be, I hope to get to heaven. a future objective reality that you hope for. Heaven is my hope. And it can be a person or event that makes your confidence sure. Jesus' death is my only hope of escaping judgment. So in verse 19, this hope we have as an anchor. That's the answer. The hope is something that is set before us. It is the future objective reality that we hope for. That's what we hope for. It is heaven. And it is the blessing that is promised in verse 14, that the sum of all the good that God has sworn to be in us in Jesus. That's what we hope for. That's our anchor. Verse 18, this hope we have as an anchor of the soul. So here's what the writer's point is. He uses three descriptions for us to understand how important this anchor is and how important it is for us that we can believe in this anchor. It's sure, it's steadfast, one which enters into the veil. We can be confident of that. We understand that. But here's where we need to really understand. What are you anchored to? What am I anchored to? Whatever it is that I'm anchored to, how confident am I that that's what's going to keep me from drifting away? There are a lot of people who are anchored to things that will not allow them into that curtain, into the sanctuary where God's at. But they're anchored to it. There are a lot of people who have been anchored to that hope. They've been anchored to it. Then for whatever the reason, they let go of it. Now here's the great thing about this anchor that God has promised us. That anchor is there. He has promised us that it's there. And I can hold on to it, I can tie myself to it, and as long as I leave it alone, I'm anchored. But the minute that I start messing with the rope that's tied to the anchor, the further I'm going to drift away. And I think it's interesting that the writer in chapter 2 talks about drifting away, and then in chapter 6 he talks about an anchor. I don't think that's a coincidence. But here's what I really think. I think when he talks about what is promised to us, what comes with this salvation, this is what I think he's talking about. With that salvation comes this idea of that rope is tied to that hope, and that hope is tied to God. That's what comes with salvation. Without that salvation, we don't have that hope, if you will. No one does. So without that baptism, without that salvation that comes through baptism and all of that, we don't have this hope. It's tied to us, that anchor. that we can be confident in. That anchor, that anchor that he talks about, where's it at? It's firmly anchored in heaven. Firmly anchored in heaven. And as long as we have a hold of the rope and we have a hold of the anchor, that's where our confidence is at. Firmly anchored in heaven. An anchor's not any good if the rope is just floating around somewhere and not tied to something. It's up to us to make sure that we don't drift away. It's up to us to make sure that we understand what this confident hope looks like. But here's what I know. Because of Scripture, because of the salvation, we understand that that's where that hope comes from. We understand that with that salvation also comes the idea of faith. It also comes the idea of obedience, patient obedience. That's what comes with that salvation. When he says in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 9, "But beloved, we are convinced of better things concerning you, and the things that accompany salvation, persevering in hope and laying hold of our inheritance and trusting in it and banking on it, being satisfied in it, and living by the power of it belongs to salvation." That's part of our salvation. Salvation is not merely an anchored rope dangling from heaven for us to just look at. But it's to understand that with that salvation, that rope is anchored to our souls. And that gives me a lot of confidence. That I can make the statement when somebody asks me, "Where are you going?" I can say, "I'm going to heaven." Confidently I can say that. Because of Jesus Christ. Because of God's infinite wisdom. Because of the fact that God does not lie. That gives me hope. Life doesn't give me hope. Life's too insecure. Life throws too many curveballs, and I never was good at hitting a curveball. But because of my anchor, I can confidently go through life and deal with whatever life gives me because my anchor is attached to my soul. We hold fast because we are held fast. Look at Hebrews chapter 3, verse 14. We have become partakers of Christ if we hold fast the beginning of our assurance firm until the end. It's not that we will become partakers of Christ if we hold fast. It's that we have become partakers of Christ. We understand that. We must hold fast, but we can only hold fast because Jesus Christ held us fast. Philippians chapter 3, verse 12. Not that I have already obtained this, or am I already perfect, Paul says, but I press on to make it my own, because Jesus Christ has made me his own. We hold fast because Christ held fast. We understand that. We understand that that rope, that anchor that's tied to us, that's anchored in heaven, is bound solidly in heaven. When we put down an anchor, when I put down that anchor, when I'm laying on my air mattress, I can only hope that that anchor is big enough and strong enough that it's going to keep me where I need to be. What we don't need to worry about with this anchor of this hope that lies within us is that it is solidly planted in heaven. We don't need to worry about the anchor. It's there. We have the security knowing that our anchor of our soul is bound to us as it is in heaven. We understand that because of God's work, it brings us to heaven. What we understand is this: God's not inconsistent. He doesn't exert himself with a bunch of promises or a bunch of oaths. And with the blood of his Son, and he doesn't do all that just to allow us to just dangle somewhere out here and hope that what we're doing is enough. No, he doesn't do that. What he does, he gives us that rope to hang on to grasp, that attaches to our soul in order for us to have that confidence that we need in order to go through life. Jesus Christ died so that we would do exactly what Paul did. Paul says, I press on in order that I may lay hold of that for which I was laid hold of by Christ Jesus. That phrase alone, that verse right there, kind of gives me the indication that Hebrews may have been written by Paul. Because that phrase, lay hold of, you don't see that very often, but it's used not only in Hebrews, but here in Philippians. I press on. I keep on. In order. Why do we do that? Why do we just not say, it'd be a lot easier to just let go of the rope and I'll go do whatever it is I need to do and I can just drift all over. One thing is, that's really scary. That's a really scary proposition if you think about it. I lay hold of that for which I also was laid hold of by Christ Jesus. Jesus Christ died for us. He died for us. That anchor that we have is there. It's attached to our soul. It's in heaven. It's strong. We know that. We understand that. So this morning, here's what I plead with you to do. If you've let go of the rope, grab back a hold of it. Attach it to yourself. Do the things that I mentioned earlier. Meditate on the Word every day. Pray. Exhort each other. Allow God into your mind so that you can understand, so that you can share. But if you have never taken hold of the rope, you don't have that hope that's solidly grounded in heaven. You don't have that. It's up to you to make that decision to do that. When Christ died for us, that hope, we understand what anchors our soul is not our subjective confidence, but the sure objective reality that God has promised. This is our anchor. And this is what we are to lay hold of. God promised it. It's not a subjective confidence, but the sure, confident reality. There's a huge difference. This is our anchor. Hope anchors our soul, because that's what God has given us to lay hold of. If you're subject to the invitation this morning, won't you come while we stand as we sing?
776. Will your anchor hold in the storms of life when the clouds